You're listening to Career Interrupted, and I'm your host, Joy Foster. Welcome to Dr. Cath Bishop, a three-time Olympian and silver medalist, a diplomat and leadership culture consultant. She's the author of the book, The Long Win, which is a beautifully written exploration of the way we see winning in culture and in life. And I'm delighted that she said yes to being on our podcast. So thank you, Cath, for coming on today. And of course, we're going to start with the first question, which is, how many career interruptions have you had? Can you describe them to us and tell us a little bit more about them?
Yeah, thanks. Great to be with you this morning. I think I've sort of had three sections of a career, one in high performance sports and Olympic rower, one as a senior diplomat, and then my current life being working across leadership and culture and as a freelance person. And so there was a pretty big move from being an athlete to being a diplomat, quite a different world. And then from leaving a really, really heavily structured world of the civil service into a freelance world. So each of those shifts was like a really big one that felt, what I was leaving was not necessarily going to set me up for what was about to come, and a sort of huge uncertainty whether I'd actually kind of leap and fall over or leap and then find a new way forward. So yeah, I look back on those now, of course, with hindsight going, yeah, they were great. They kind of really recharged me. They really challenged me. But at the time, it was tough. And I think like leaving a career as an elite athlete is always incredibly difficult. You know that you can't do it forever, but you'd really like to kind of have another go if you could. I think having been to 3 Olympics, I felt, and I'd been through quite a transition across, particularly into the last one. I did in my heart feel, I think I've done enough, 10 years of rowing, 3 times a day, training 3 times a day, 7 days a week, most weeks of the year. I think in my heart, I kind of knew, but it's a sport I love. I'm still on the river, still train. And so, readjusting your relationship to sport is a challenge. And then, yeah, going into diplomatic world was actually going back to a world that I'd been really interested in. I'd studied international politics and languages. And so it's actually the career I always wanted to do. And if anything, it's the rowing that then kind of took me on a tangent. So again, I guess in my heart, it was just something that I was really passionate about. And I feel really grateful that the door opened, because that's not, you can't rely on that. And it's dependent on fairly random factors in these application processes. But I was also aware that, it's in a different world, different rules would apply. Like, you haven't got coaches shouting it through a megaphone. What felt like really, really important high stakes stuff in the Olympics really isn't, because actually we're now in the real world of things happening that are life and death. So it was a big adjustment on much bigger scale kind of issues. And yeah, you just have to adapt. You have to be full of adaptation. And I guess across all of these changes, that's the case. Then stepping out of the civil service and thinking, could I create a freelance world that nobody ever taught you about as a career option? There isn't a kind of guidebook. And at that point also, I had 2 young kids and wanted more flexibility and basically wanted to bring the things that I was fascinated in from both diplomacy and sport, people, behavior, culture, performance. What does that really mean? How do we help people thrive when they're trying to be at their best? Those were the questions that were kind of burning in me to create a context to explore.
That's so fascinating. And all of those, you mentioned it. It was that they were heavy. They felt like heavy decisions at the time. Which career interruption, and it might have been more than one, but which one do you feel like the stakes were the highest when you transitioned out of one into another?
I think probably leaving the civil service was the hardest one, because, you've got some security, you've got a path, you've got a way of life. I really love the subject matter. Like, I think there is nothing more fascinating than foreign policy. My God, look where we're at the moment. And it is in many ways human behavior played out on the biggest stage with the biggest stakes. So I really love that kind of operating in that world, understanding at a deeper level. But I didn't totally love the civil service. I found it quite constraining in ways, and I felt that it wasn't, always helping me to be at my best. And I was sort of being told to soften off my edges, to kind of keep moving through. And I kind of thought, I don't want to soften off my edges. I actually think you'd be better if I didn't soften off my edges. And I don't want to be an organization that thinks it's better if I soften who I am. And so I think that was one of the driving forces, plus needing more flexibility with young kids, because foreign policy does not work on a 9-to-5 basis. And so there were a whole lot of factors, really. And when my daughter was born, she had additional needs as well. And I thought, I don't know what's going to be kind of what that will require, but I think I'm going to need some more flexibility. And so it was hard. It's a wrench. I still love reading about it. I've still got lots of friends in that world. And, it's a kind of life of traveling. I'm a restless soul. I enjoyed that, and I miss some aspects of that. But I kind of really also wanted some more freedom in, creating something else and seeing if I could. And that's been an incredible experiment now for 10 years.
Well, and I want to hear more about that in a second. But when you were making that big transition out of diplomacy and to have something more flexible, and there were a lot of unknowns, what was the biggest fear or doubt you had in that moment?
Yeah, whether I'd have anything, whether people would, pay me to do anything, whether I could offer something of value that was credible, that would fit with what people wanted. I think what helped me through it was kind of really small chunks and being really open to trying different things. Luckily, from coming from the sports career, I had quite a lot of experience in speaking. And so I was able to have some very initial kind of speaking work. And that actually gave me a platform to, maybe spend longer time at the event I was speaking at and find out a bit more about it. Partly had links into a business school where I, as an athlete, spoken and was being asked to speak there. And then, I'd stay and listen to the rest of the leadership program and say, do you mind if I listen to the rest of the day or the session before and the session after? And I just kind of thought, oh God, I totally get this stuff, because this is the world I've been living in. Quite a lot of, although I hadn't studied psychology, I hadn't studied leadership theory, actually a lot of it's being rewritten now as research throws out some of the myths of the 80s and before. And, we learn more now about how the brain works, how we respond under pressure. And of course, sports psychology is a very moving world that I'd seen in practice and become increasingly fascinated in and read around. So I actually thought, gosh, I get lots of this and I've seen it in practice. And therefore, I can bring practical stories to the concepts that they're learning about. So it was a real kind of explore and try. And then I sort of said, could I help facilitate on something here, and gradually built some facilitation skills. So it's small steps, being curious, and also being willing to slightly throw myself in when I wasn't totally prepared and making it work.
I think that's great advice. And I think something that our listeners will really, really appreciate as they're trying to navigate how they make that big leap from whatever it is that they were doing to something else. And we have a lot of people listening who have had, careers, maybe like you, there were aspects they loved, but then other aspects that they don't love, and they want to, switch things up. But also people resonate with the having children, right? And the impact that has on your career, particularly if you do have additional needs or your children have additional needs, etc. How that can really change things. So what was the biggest surprise in this whole adventure?
I mean, I guess finding that I really thrive in a freelance world, because life isn't freelance. You grow up going to school, unless maybe you're homeschooled, maybe you're kind of doing a bit of freelancing there in your lifestyle, but otherwise you're in this school structure, churning up through the years and the exams that did all that, and then joined the university world and churned through the sort of gears there and the hierarchy and the layers. And then actually the rowing world, the international GB rowing team is another little hierarchy, and you churn your way up through the levels to hopefully get near the top and in a crew. And then the civil service is just this, again, enormous machine that you are a cog in, and you find your way, and you've got your little kind of career tracks and promotions and things. So my whole life I've been inside these structures that are telling me what the next level is, and I've diligently got on with getting to the next level. And suddenly I have none of that, and I've no idea whether I can manage that, because I've never had to. And so, but I really love it. I find it's helped me to be really creative, and I am kind of naturally creative. It gives me huge variety. I don't have to do the stuff I don't want to do. It's very rare that I get up in the morning and don't want to do what I'm doing, because I've chosen and accepted it all and taken it in my diary. And, I guess perhaps a surprise that people are interested in what I offer. And, at first I thought, oh, this is really clunky, this sport and diplomacy. That's really odd. It's a bit weird. God, how am I going to sort of, make that not seem so weird? But of course, that is the USP. And I think that's been a kind of real flip for me, that don't try and be sort of something you're not. And I go, well, I didn't quite win the Olympic gold. It's the Olympics, and I didn't quite spend years as an ambassador. But the whole thing is I've seen both worlds at a really serious level up close. And that gives me incredible breadth of perspective of a clear-cut high-performance world and a very, very messy, but still very demanding world. And that gives me a lot of insight into things. And so sometimes if you only use sports metaphors, people get a bit turned off if they're not into it, or go, it's too simple. But I get other worlds too. And so, creating that sort of USP around who I am, that's been a kind of surprise to think that actually people really value that.
Well, I think that was one of the things that comes clear and comes across really clearly in your book, The Long Win, because you tell the stories of being, involved in wars and diplomacy involved there, and also what it's like to be, in the GB system. And you weave both of those stories, and even motherhood was weaved into that as well. And I thought it's a really well-written book, but also I think what you've really captured in the book, The Long Win, which I think, probably is a lot of what you learned through this experience, is a really concise history of leadership, right? And this is the way that the world has thought for a very long time. And it's time to change the lens, the perspective, and, really focus on winning in a different way. And it's a really beautifully written book. And I do think a lot of people in leadership should read it for sure, because I think the perspective is very different to what the common thinking is around leadership. I mean, there's a lot of things you probably learned, but what was one of the big learnings, takeaways from your experience?
Yeah, I think, the book is partly making sense of these different worlds that I'd seen into. And particularly, this obsession with winning that sometimes actually holds us back and we can't see it. And it's not smart. If we're actually trying to be successful, then we need to define success in a way that is going to help us explore our potential with others, because it's very rare that we can really succeed on our own in anything that we do. So it's a theme that came up. I wasn't expecting it to come up all the time. In fact, I thought when I left Olympic sport, I thought, oh, thank God, I'm get rid of this obsession with winning and everyone talking about who's a winner and who's a loser and this sort of binary world, when actually over 3 Olympics, I'd come to see that it was about much more than that. Because there are people who win and can be very, very depressed and empty and feel disconnected from anything. And so that's not a great picture of success, is it? Just crossing the line first, but then you're left with nothing of lasting value. So even in success, even in sport, I'd seen sort of, let's not get too narrow with our definition of success. Otherwise, you're chasing something that you're very unlikely to get. And even if you do get it, then it doesn't always look that good. And that was a real shock to me, that, oh, you mean winning a gold medal doesn't bring like everlasting happiness and nirvana? That seems to be the myth that's sold to us all. And so, I'd already thought, there's something a bit wrong about how we're thinking about success in sport. But then I found sort of, everywhere I went that, organizations talking about, we have got to win. What are you trying to win? I'm not quite sure about that. We've just got to win and we've got to have winning teams. And then they set up all these targets and you find people sabotaging each other in order to hit their target, and sales teams not sharing something across a region because it won't contribute to their own figures. And you see all this behavior come in that's actually holding you back from exploring what's most important. So I've become really fascinated in our definitions of success as a way into the culture of what matters, what leaders think, is important, and, then what the way teams behave in order to kind of to meet that, and to use that as a way of opening up what is our culture about. Is that actually going to help us get where we want to get to? Because we have got sucked into these sort of temporary, material, short-term definitions of success. And there's sometimes we're not investing in the things that actually would help us over the longer term to really explore our potential. I think some organizations are starting to see this because productivity is stalled, engagement's going down, we're not hitting the target. So you have these sort of suggestions externally that things aren't really optimized, But then I think people often aren't sure where to dig back in. And sometimes that definition of success is a really good place to start pulling that apart. Does it have any meaning? Is it helping people spend their time on the right things? Is it helping people enjoy the work they do, that feel it's worthwhile and they understand why they've got to do what they do? And so, just saying, well, I've got a really clear target, it's 10% growth or, X number. Actually, that's not helpful clarity if it doesn't really relate to what people are doing on a day-to-day basis and the choices they've got to make. And of course, people are very easily distracted with all of the things that are hurling towards us. So if we haven't got a compelling, easily understandable definition of success we can connect to, then often we're not really able to perform as we might.
I love that. And, at TechPixies, we have every Friday in our community, I post weekly wins, everyone share their weekly wins. And I'm really adamant that it's, it is whatever your win is. And really we've defined the success in our community as something you're proud of. What's something that I've done this week that I'm proud of? And, it might be in my house, my husband does most of the cooking. So it might be, that I actually cooked a meal and because I'm very proud of myself when I do that, the one time a week that I do it. But it's that idea that, that you find something that you're proud of and you share it with a community so that the community can celebrate you. And we find this to be very effective. And I use it within our team as well. We've done it for 268 weeks in a row. Wow. Where every time we meet, I say, okay, I want everyone to tell me the personal win and a business win. And it helps me to get to know them because often, it's sometimes hard to find a win on a difficult week. Let's say a parent is ill and needs support, or let's say a child is home and, your workflow has been disrupted. So finding the win in actually, I took time to be with my child, or I took time to be with my aging parent that needed me. That's the win in the week. And I think I'm a big fan of shifting the word success to what am I proud of? Because there's a totally different way of looking at it that way.
Yeah, and I really like what you described there for sort of two reasons, just to stop and sort of think back about what you've done. One, you've broadened out what success looks like the personal win and the business win. Yeah, we're now kind of thinking about how we're thriving, not just I'm some machine churning something out. And then the second thing was you're also looking about quality, not quantity. So the quality of time I might have spent with somebody is a beautiful thing. It's not, ticking off something or how much stuff I've done this week. It's actually going, I did something that had an impact on another human being. I think that's really important in a world where we've got, endless to-do lists and all of that stuff. There's a danger. We're really not. We're just whirring away on a sort of treadmill, hamster wheel. And so I think those are really important, that our definition of success has got an element of quality, not quantity to it, and that it is broader. It's many things. It's also, another factor is that it's not just the outcome, it's actually the process. It's not so much necessarily to cook the meal, that you wanted to contribute, that you got out of your comfort zone, that you were willing to do it. Those things are actually what's valuable, rather than what it looks like on the plate, sort of thing. And that's what that tells us, that story. It's the how, the process is really important, not just this kind of moment where we serve up the dish, or where we cross the line first or third or ninth or wherever it is in a race, and these outcomes. But we often are quite skewed to, they're easy to measure, they're what our organizations typically measure, these sort of output metrics. They're not very meaningful, and often they don't really then help us grow and continue.
Yeah, no, that's such a great point. Well, I was listening to your book in preparation for this podcast, and it's been a great different perspective on thinking in sport. And so I was a former athlete I was a rower, and then I was an archer. I was on the United States archery team. I tried out for 2 Olympics. And what is fascinating to me is now as a coach. So I coach rowers, and I coach J12 rowers, and I coach under 15 girls in football. And we were in this match on the weekend, and of course I'm preparing for this podcast, and so the other team scores 1, and then we match up, so it's 1-1, and then we score, so then it becomes 2-1, and then they score, and it becomes 2-2. And then because I'm double booked, I'm coaching rowing in the afternoon and football in the morning, and it was a late kickoff, and then there was this activity in the afternoon. I had to leave with 15 minutes to go. I have 2 co-coaches. So there were three of us on the coaching team. So I could leave and they would be fine. And of course it was extricating myself when it's 2-2, and I was 15 minutes, I had to leave. And I heard myself And then I was amazing because I'd been listening to your book. So I hear myself saying to the girls, fight for it. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is what Cath is talking about. You know, the language that we use, you know, we're going to battle, we're going to war. It's like it's an under 15 League C football match. And here I am using the word fight for it. And it was really interesting because I said to my co-coaches as I was leaving, my co-managers, I said, well, I look forward to hearing from you that we won, you know, 3-2 as I'm leaving. That's what I told him. And then, of course, I'm sitting in the car and I'm just like praying that it works out, that we win. You know, the stakes were high. Like if we lose this one, there was no way we were going to win the league. And it turns out that the team that was undefeated in the league, they lost. And, you know, we didn't expect them to lose. And so now we're back up as tied league leaders because on the very last play of the game, one of our midfielders took a shot off a corner straight in, and we did win 3-2. But even in that small environment of, you know, that I thought, gosh, you know, I still get wrapped up by sport and winning and wanting to win. And, you know, we've been working with these girls for years, and it's been so much fun to see them just, you know, advance for themselves personally and continue to play sport. Many girls drop out in their teenage years, and our team is over. We've got more girls than we have spaces, right? It's over subscribed. And I think a big part of that comes from the work that we do with them, not about winning, but about really improving, right? And at the end, we want them to walk away with every match feeling that they've improved. And the girl that scored had never scored before. So it was really exciting from that side. But I did message my co-managers afterwards and I said, well, first of all, it was a good job I left because I'm really glad I left because I would have made a decision that girl would have been off the pitch and she's the one who scored. Wow. But I was really grateful that I left. But then also, having had your perspective of the book, I messaged the coaches and I said, you know, we've got to make sure that they are not, that the sole focus for the remaining part of the season isn't about winning the league. It's about winning for themselves, that they feel like they're making progress every match we play. And that if they are doing that, they will do their best. And that's what matters. And I think back to about 3 or 4 years ago when we were coaching them to win the league, the D League. So they went from the D League now up to the C League. And then they went up to the B League and now they've come back to the C League. You know, it's a different perspective. And I think also reading your book was really helpful to remind me of that perspective and to realize as a coach, you have a massive amount of influence on these young girls. And actually, if we can really get them to see it's not about winning, it's the long win. It's who you become in the process. Exactly. And if you're doing your best, there's a chance you're going to win, but you have no control over what someone else does. Yeah. And your value should not be dependent on how the other team shows up, but on how you show up. It's a beautiful gift to be able to give to young girls, especially girls who are involved in sport. And it very much will shape the way that they think and interact with the world. So I feel like reading your book, The Long Win, came at a really good time for me and a good reminder, you know, that whatever is going to happen is going to happen. But at the end of the day, we want healthy, happy girls who are still playing sport. And that's what really, really matters. So I just want to say thank you.
I love how you sort of brought it alive there. And it isn't about not wanting to win, but it is about really zoning in on this process of who we're becoming in the pursuit of it and accepting we can't fully control it. But we are not defined by that outcome. We want it. Of course, we'll do everything we can. But there is a bigger game we're playing, you know, and that is that we're thriving, in the pursuit of the competitions, in pursuit of, you know, being part of a team that we'll be in touch with maybe for many years to come. You know, that's the stuff that people will remember. You know, if we sacrifice that for a short-term result, you know, then everything usually falls apart at some point. So I love how you sort of connected to that, because you've got those pressures in the moment that could pull you to just think, oh God, everything depends on this. It's so important, and we've failed if it doesn't work. You know, especially a game like football where you have really, really low scoring, what makes it so beautiful, isn't it? There are so many different moments that can happen, you know, with every pass that are unpredictable. And so it's about that, how we're managing that unpredictability, communicating in those moments. And I think after is making sure that we actually celebrate the same way regardless of result.
Yeah.
not this sort of we're all down if it hasn't come off, but actually there would be also beautiful moments in the middle of that game where they supported each other when, when the other team equalized. And those are really critical moments that we need to zone in on what happened in the course of that, however long it was, rather than just where are we at kind of at the end. Because I think there are so many moments that are really formative to help the girls to value that. What you did in that moment was really crucial, and it set us up. It gave us the foundation for good things to happen later. Not that you can ever sort of guarantee they will, but if you're always paying attention to those foundations of how we communicate, how we think, how we connect together, how we value what we bring, how we keep learning. And I like that emphasis as well, the sort of constant improving. That's really all we can do, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's one of the greatest gifts of life, when you realize that you can be a lifelong learner, which we know now you can be and should be. The brain doesn't stop developing at 13 anymore.
What a joy.
So let's tell people what you're doing now, where they can find you online if they want to connect with you.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm very easy to find. I'm on LinkedIn. I have a website, cathbishop.com. I'm on Instagram, Cath_Bishop. And I'm involved in a range of different things across the leadership and culture development space. So I teach at the Judge Business School in Cambridge. And I work with leadership teams. I work with teams really leaning into the sort of cultural side of things. I do some work in sport, British gymnastics at the moment on their really important culture change journey since the White Review kind of looked at all the poor treatment and abuse in that sport that's gone on. And other work around making sure we are looking after people in sport, caring for them, whatever level they're playing. It actually doesn't matter. And so that sense that we're building brilliant communities in sport, not that kind of keeping people safe is something we do on the side or just the job of the welfare officer, but really thinking about we've all got a role, whether we're volunteers, the head coach, a parent, to create thriving communities in sport. And giving lots of talks along the way about the book too.
I love it. And last question, is there a motto that you live by?
Do you know, I don't consciously have a motto. I like reading. I read a lot, and maybe that's my motto: keep reading, keep thinking. And so I'm always picking up new ideas and things from that. I mean, I guess sort of a couple of things from the rowing world that stick with me in my head sometimes. One would be around, it doesn't matter sort of how tired you are, just bring the best you've got. So you're not going, oh, I can't do it today, or I'm going to bring the best of whatever I've got today to things. And that sense, again, when things were going badly, we used to sort of talk at the end, just to keep saying, let's keep exploring what's possible together. What can we do together? Let's not focus on what's wrong. Let's keep exploring what's possible. And I think that for me is a kind of source of my motivation. Sort of what else is possible to improve sport, to improve the cultures we work in, our workplaces, how we understand what it means to create thriving teams.
I love that. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Cath, and sharing so much about your journey and also exploring such an important and interesting topic.
Great. Enjoyed the conversation. Thank you so much for inviting me.
All right. Well, I feel blessed and honored that we had a 3-time Olympian and silver medalist and diplomat and mother come onto this podcast to share her ups and downs of her career and all of the changes that ensued. So thank you very much for listening. And if you've enjoyed this podcast, there'll be another one next week, and we'll catch up with you then. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.